Hey David, so you're a senior director with SAP. You're currently involved working with Leonardo and predictive analytics. We're here to discuss the role that films will play in showing us the possibilities of our digital future. And we're not doing this just completely randomly. There is a reason for it. SAP is sponsoring this Toronto International Film Festival.
Yes.
It's for the second time, and it's the Our Digital Future film series, right?
That's right.
Which I've seen some of the synopsis, and I've seen some of the actors and our directors, and I think we have some Oscar-worthy films on our hands here.
It's a great lineup.
Yeah, it is, and some really interesting things that are going to have people questioning their roles and their morals and their ambitions in the digital era and the digital societies that we're creating. I think what's particularly fitting about our digital future is that Leonardo, which I just mentioned that you work on, that system was launched back in May. The SAP's Leonardo system.
Yep.
It is named after Leonardo da Vinci, and I think the idea behind that is that it's all about innovation and bringing
creativity.
And bringing a lot of ideas together in a package, right? Which I guess is what that great man did. And it's something in my mind that makes it feel like the future is kind of all arriving at once, right? It seems to be kind of a feeling at the moment out there. And what Leonardo is, it's essentially a toolkit, isn't it, for organisations to adapt things like AI, blockchain, machine learning, Internet of Things, big data. So just in the spirit of those two things, our digital future and Leonardo, I wanted to talk about what some of these technologies might mean for humanity. I just actually rewatched Blade Runner at the weekend.
Oh, you did?
So I guess the concept of AI is really fresh in my mind right now. It's obviously a fascinating one that's getting people interested in talking. And I did read this story about Facebook and the AI that they had to shut down. I'm not sure how overblown that was, whether that was really why they did it. So there's a lot of kind of scaremongering out there. And a lot but then
lots of hope, lots of fear.
So that's the thing, is there's also a lot of positive possibilities, right?
Yes.
And I did read one interview, it was with an AI developer, who was saying that we have nothing to worry about. We should just embrace AI as much as possible. We shouldn't be fearing it. And it's just really the science fiction that is making us feel that way. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, so AI has all kinds of potential, and also, raising lots of valid concerns at the same time. There's no doubt about that. The thing that we have to remember, actually, if we step back, actually, and talk about Leonardo, before we talk about AI, whenever we talk about transformations, or transforming an industry, or transforming our lives, or the way we live with technology, there's really sort of two aspects to that. One is there's the transformative technology, right, and how these next gen technologies are going to sort of shape our world. But then there's also the aspect of how we innovate around business process, or process beyond just business. It could be business process. It could be the processes. If we think of processes, the way we do things, the process of our lives, that kind of thing. And any transformation is about how you take this next gen technology and you apply it or change the way you do things, change the process. And so that's really what Leonardo's all about. Leonardo's about the systematic approach to innovation, not just around next-gen technologies like AI and machine learning and big data and that kind of stuff, but also how you change process. Okay, so in that context, when you start talking about artificial intelligence, let's say, there's lots of potential for artificial intelligence, right? This idea of creating computers that can think, see, hear, understand and interpret like a human, right? How you apply that, how you change the way you do things, is really where the hope and the opportunity comes from, and also the fear. So I think there's huge potential, to make our lives better using artificial intelligence, right? Finding ways to improve healthcare, right? If you talk at a personal level, how do we use artificial intelligence to guide, or vastly accelerate, what happens in health? There are interesting risks around, there's lots of talk about right now, right, with North Korea and their nukes and all this conversation about war and potential of war and conflict and whatever. Interesting quotes from, people like Putin recently over the weekend about, how whoever leads AI is going to sort of dominate the world, whatever country. These questions, obviously raise fears, and they're valid fears, right? Like, who's to say we don't sort of take AI and use it to create processes to dominate or subject people.
Yeah.
In interesting ways, and sort of unleash these machines. So, they are valid concerns. I think the potential is huge, right, for changing life for the better.
Yeah.
But there needs to be open dialogue about what does that look like and how do we manage that and control that. We can't just let technology happen, right? We need to shape it in a way. We have to create our digital future, right? That's what that's about. That's what the film series is about too.
Yeah.
It's not just about letting it happen.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could say that letting it happen is not really what's happening, right? Like, we do have people obviously creating this technology. Whether it's going to be out of our hands one day is another question.
Yep.
But I guess that goes back to the conversation of, do we now have certain technology companies who are controlling a lot of the political future,
the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean by letting it happen, right? Like, there's there needs to be public discourse, public dialogue about how we shape the use of technology. And that isn't really happening. It's happening in technology circles. It's happening among, academics and intellectuals and that kind of stuff. But there needs to be more of a public discourse about that. And how do we sort of drive those kinds of conversations about AI, which is really what our digital future is about.
Yeah, and is that a case of more education on these kind of topics, or what makes that happen, do you think?
I think, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we treat technology kind of like a superhero, right? So let's pick, like, I don't know, Spider-Man, right? He's a superhero. He's got these superhero powers. He can, he's got spider-like capabilities, cling to things, shoot webs, whatever. So he's got these attributes or capabilities. And the thing that makes him the superhero is sort of the plot of the story, right? It's like how he goes and saves, New York and solves crime and that kind of stuff. And around technology, we have these superheroes too, right? Like, AI is it a hero or a villain, I guess, is an outstanding question. And it has these capabilities and attributes, right? But people struggle to understand, what's the storyline? What's the plot in my life? How AI gets applied? We sort of have these interesting glimpses, right? Someone says, well, AI is going to, it's going to put people out of work. Okay, well, that's an interesting statement. Well, what does that really look like? What's the plot around that, right? It's just this random statement that gets people scared.
Yeah.
And so, I think the challenge is finding ways to, tell the story of what our future might look like, if we shape technology or allow it to sort of change the way we do things in certain ways. Yeah. And so it's a storytelling challenge, I think, in terms of getting a sort of a broader dialogue going among people.
So do you think it's too easy for people to kind of take an extreme utopian mindset or an extreme dystopian mindset and not kind of see the nuances in between? Because there's also the thing of it's very messy, isn't it, all this technology evolution? Like, we don't always know where it's going to end up. It's not predictable, is it?
Yeah.
We created things like Twitter and we ended up with things like fake news that we didn't really envisage, did we? So I guess...
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, the dystopian view and the utopian view, they're kind of like, it's cheating to just sort of, gravitate to one or the other, right? Because it's the easy answer. It's either things are going to be wonderful and you ignore everything else, or things are going to be terrible and you forget about all the benefits, right?
Yeah.
And the challenge is sort of getting to a place where we have, an honest dialogue about, these are risks and how do we sort of mitigate them, and these are opportunities and how do we make sure that, we're giving those opportunities a chance to sort of grow and flourish.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. And I think the machine learning is another topic, isn't it? That it's not the same thing as AI, right?
Yeah. Machine learning is is depending on who you talk to, but machine learning would sort of be or AI would actually be a subset of machine learning, right? So machine learning is this idea of given data and information about how things work, whether it's the digital world, whether it's the physical world, wherever it is, we can take this data, we can sort of look for the patterns within the data, we can learn from that data, and then we can make choices about action right, based on the things that we've learned. And that these systems can evolve, right? They can, as patterns change, they can recognize the changing patterns and in the process sort of decide, how to act differently, okay? AI, artificial intelligence, is sort of a subset of machine learning, is the way I think about it, that is very much focused on how do we create machine learning capabilities that mimic human capabilities, right? The ability to see, right? So vision, the ability to sort of see things, with a computer. Like a self-driving car requires vision of its own kind. The ability to hear and understand language, is a very human activity. So AI tends to be a subset of machine learning that's focused on the human element.
So machine learning is where a lot of this kind of work is going to be done. That's going to then contribute to the AI. That will be kind of the back door, the machine learning.
Yeah. So so machine learning will be applied in broadly across business, right? It may not look like a human, it may not think like a human, but it's smart enough to find the patterns within data, around any sort of element of a business process. Right?
Yeah. So just off the top of your head then, how is machine learning going to change business processes then?
So it varies by industry, right? So a lot of the interesting applications right out of the gate tend to be around how we shape engagement with customers, as a company. So, so SAP has quite a few customers that uses, for example, SAP predictive analytics to find patterns within data and say, this customer is likely to leave soon, right? The patterns in the data suggest that. As a human, you wouldn't be able to sort of visually see that within the data, but you can see that pattern, you know what I mean, when you use machines to look at it in detail and say, what kind of offer could we make to this customer to keep them around? We've done an analysis and we know that, this customer probably likes, in the case of TIFF, this kind of a movie, right? And so how do we, figure out, what that person, what their interests are, that kind of stuff, in order to make an offer to them that's very specific to what they might like. That would be on the customer side, but there's all kinds of examples. How do you predict that a machine's going to fail, right? Yeah. Just looking at essentially the vibrations of the machine or the temperature of the machine. How do you determine the quality of the food coming off a production line? Based on, again, the temperatures and vibrations and speed and that kind of stuff. Right. All of that are applications of machine learning.
Right. So hugely transformative, and again, probably something that we don't fully know where it's going to lead us, do we? Like, there's probably going to be, we have ideas in our mind of where this is going to take us, and I'm sure there are already applications out there that are kind of working and achieving benefits. Yep. But then there are also probably going to be knock-on effects, and there are going to be new ideas, new applications, because this is what's happening with technology, right? It seems to be kind of an exponential thing at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and so take artificial intelligence, right? So AI is fundamental to a self-driving car, right? So we say, hey, AI's now able to drive a vehicle. Well, that means I don't have to drive. I can sit there, read a book, whatever, watch TV or whatever it is, we want to do. Enables more accessibility. You don't need a driver's license. You could have, difficulty with your vision and still, be mobile, right? So there's lots of potential directly, but, how does that combine? Right? We often see the sort of the direct application of a technology, but we don't think through how these technologies sort of come together to be very transformative, right?
And how humans deal with them.
Exactly. Yeah. So now you have a self-driving car. If you combine that with, say 3D printing of materials, how is that going to radically change the supply chain? It probably will, right? But nobody's thinking about how the convergence of these, these transformative technologies and how that'll shape things. Those are very difficult things to see.
Yeah, especially on a global scale, right?
Exactly.
That's more often how we do things, isn't it? Yeah. And I think blockchain is another one, just along the same lines, where we do kind of have an idea of how it could work. Like there are people on this kind of crazy libertarian side where they want the banking system to just be completely demolished, and then there are people who are kind of looking at it more pragmatically and saying, we can make banking more efficient, we can get more people into the global banking system.
Yep.
You know, things along those lines.
Yep.
I think the idea of blockchain still has a lot of people scratching their heads. The idea of this digital ledger. But then we're also seeing a lot of investment in things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, you know, because of the promise of blockchain, largely, probably.
Yep.
But also a lot of speculation as well.
Exactly.
More corporations and governments are taking it seriously.
Yep.
Which kind of signals that we could be going more towards something.
Yep.
And I think that blockchain, you know, the idea, as I said, it could be increasing the efficiency of the financial system, massively streamlining supply chains, or it could even go as far as, you know, changing democracy and how we vote and things like that.
Totally.
So what are your thoughts on blockchain?
There's tons of potential for blockchain, and I agree that it's still early on, right? Like how it gets applied within, you know, within those environments that you sort of explained is, you know, still so new to people, right? But it is absolutely transformative. You know, a lot of the way, you know, business works today tends to be, you know, built around these powerhouses, right? Like we have financial institutes, you know, if we talk on the finance side, where, you know, they're at the center of every transaction, right? And does blockchain sort of break that apart, you know, and the need to have them at the center of every transaction? We have supply chains where, you know, again, you know, there are small numbers of companies that own certain supply chains end to end because, you know, they need to build a level of trust. How do you build a level of trust? Well, the best way to trust it is for you to own the whole thing, you know. And how do you use blockchain to break that down? Or, you know, the food supply chain where, you know, we have, you know, massive fraud in the food industry. People don't realize that. You know, a lot of the foods that you eat, they're contaminated, but you have no idea, you know. But blockchain could, and nobody knows where in the supply chain, you know, that fraud is happening. It's very difficult to identify because food is processed, and as soon as it's processed, it's difficult to know, you know, exactly what it is. So, you know, blockchain has a way, you know, these ledgers that everyone can sort of see, you know, brings a level of transparency to the supply chain, you know, and how does that change things, right? You know, does that change control, right? And dominance that we, you know, the patterns we see, you know, certain patterns we see within the economy today, you know, does it sort of erode that and break that away, and what new forms then shape around that? Right?
Yeah, hugely fascinating. And I think that, well, blockchain is another issue, but the Internet of Things is also a similar kind of concept, right? Where the thought of all these sensors being placed around everywhere, you know, could be very democratizing, or, you know, some people are kind of saying, is this an Orwellian kind of future that we're heading into? So I think a lot of people still think IoT is just about like smart fridges and stuff, but it kind of goes a lot deeper than that, and businesses probably going to be, that's where a lot of the action is going to be, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually a great example of IoT in at TIFF this year around our digital future is the film Dragon Eyes, and it's this, you know, here's a film that was put together using footage from public cameras, right? So you have all these cameras all over a city,
right? And
how do you actually create a film, you know, just using that footage? And it's a very interesting idea that, you know, we can, in the case of film, you know, if we talk Orwellian in nature, right, in Big Brother, you know, that we could have we could track someone end to end, right, with all these cameras all over the country. The issue, you know, well, what it gets to, this, you know, is it Orwellian and Big Brother in nature, or is it not, really comes down to process. How do we apply it, right? How do we make use of it, given the transformative technology that we have? So again, it's one of these things where, you know, there's huge potential. You know, if you can put sensors on things, you know, it's amazing what can change. We're already seeing that in healthcare, right? Think of all the people running around with Fitbits and monitors and that kind of stuff. You know, when I'm out cycling, you know, it's tracking, you know, through my phone in this case, but, you know, you can actually, you know, add sensors onto it where, you know, it's tracking everything that you're doing, you know, runners, the same sort of thing. So all that information, you know, from these devices, these things can be, you know, huge benefit, right, to people in society.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think tying all this technology together, something I know that you're close to, big data and analytics, predictive analytics. Maybe not as exciting as this stuff, or kind of maybe as like physically tangible as the stuff we've talked about so far.
Yep.
But arguably probably the most transformative in terms of how it's going to kind of help us to organise as humans on a global and local scale, and even how we identify with ourselves and with each other, right?
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Big data is one of these things that's sort of hidden behind the scenes, right? We don't think about it too much, but all of the examples that we've talked about, right? Everything from AI and machine learning and blockchain and Internet of Things, fundamental to all of those is big data.
Yeah.
It's the underlying element that pins that. This idea that we can take all this digital information, that sort of describes our world, and we can make sense of it. And then we can predict things, or we can decide what's going on. The Human Face of Big Data, that documentary, is a film that really sort of explored this hidden thing, big data, and the human aspects and impact that it can have, right? And everything from the way it'll transform healthcare and solve some of the biggest health questions that we have, to raising questions around privacy and Big Brother, and what and some of the activities in particular in the United States. The U.S. government has some of them monitoring, secretly collecting data. And what. We could argue that in the United States, it's somewhat argued that it's being used for good reasons, but then there are examples in other countries where this kind of information and data has been used to squash dissidents, right, to certain regimes. So these are very real issues that people are facing today.
Yeah, and it goes back to the dialogue you were talking about at the start, right, with AI. It has to be a continued dialogue, and I think probably more people have to understand kind of how big data works first of all, and then the implications of it as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how do you bring an understanding of these technological issues, right, to the general population? They're not necessarily engineers, right? Or we're not engineers, but yet these questions are fundamental to our lives, right? And so how do we drive a conversation about that? In a way that everyone can sort of understand and relate to, and participate in.
Absolutely, and I think that kind of brings us to the point of our Digital Future series, right? And films, there are probably more sci-fi films now every year. I know we had a great lineup last year as well, and if you think back to Blade Runner, as I mentioned earlier, Terminator, RoboCop, but now we have more. There seem to be more now. There's like Her. There was Lion last year, which was a great movie, which
based on a true story, actually.
Yeah, the story that wouldn't have been remotely possible without the amazing technology, right? Really interesting one this year. One of our Digital Future films, Downsizing, which is an Alexander Payne film, which I'm hugely excited to see. So it stars Matt Damon, Kirsten Wiig. It's based on a future where Norwegian scientists have discovered how to shrink humans to 5 inches tall. So it's a social satire, kind of looking at the population problem we have, the environmental concerns that we have, and then looks at this couple that have decided to shrink themselves, I think partially to say, okay, well, this is how we're going to save the world, and then also to become rich as well, because your money goes a lot further when you're only 5 inches. I wouldn't do it, I don't think. I can't say for certain, but would you do it? And also, what role do you think technology will have to play in saving humanity from itself?
Would I shrink myself? That is a great question. I guess if it's for the greater good, maybe I would. And if someone else goes first.
Okay. Yeah.
The film, it looks to be an interesting sort of look at some of the challenges that we have, right? My read is it's all about this idea of can we have our cake and eat it too, right? Like. We don't want to give up our consumeristic lifestyle where we're consuming all these natural resources that we have, right? But we got to do something, right? Hurricane Harvey is a great example of, in the States, we have denial by some that that global warming is happening. and yet we've got Hurricane Harvey, which is a massive storm, and now Irma's coming in, and it's considered one of the largest hurricanes they've ever seen on record. And global warming is exactly a result of our consumption of resources and consuming resources in a way that we don't understand, right? So we have sort of blindly applied these technologies, right, these capabilities, without giving thought to their implications in terms of how it's going to shape our world long term, right? Short-term gain without long-term consideration. And so downsizing is this kind of seems like this tongue-in-cheek look at how do we address the challenges we face on planet Earth, and still sort of live in our consumeristic lifestyle. But I think that the thing that the reality is, short of someone figure out how to shrink everyone, we do need to find some technological solutions, right? And we need to embrace them. I mean, maybe not, definitely we need to find technological solutions, but we also need to accept some of the technological solutions that are there, right? So we know, for example, that renewable energy is a viable option. And some countries have taken some serious steps to say we're going to be completely renewable, to reduce our environmental the footprint of our energy consumption. Those are very serious steps that could be taken, right? But I think the movie Downsizing really sort of opens this question of what could we do, how could technology be applied to address some of these challenges we face as a society.
Absolutely, and so as you mentioned, there are kind of realistic solutions. This probably isn't a realistic solution. We don't know, right? But there are realistic solutions. But what is the challenge in kind of human nature being what it is, getting people collectively to kind of make sure these solutions happen? Because when you have people like Stephen Hawking saying we've got 100 years to escape planet Earth, kind of makes you think that, well, is humanity going to be able to pull itself together quick enough and make this kind of thing happen, right? We're not. We've never been terribly good at predicting, our future. So, is it 100 years? Is it 200? Sometimes Earth is more resilient than we realize. The flip side, though, is that good scientific research. We've never had more research or smarter people, if you like, looking at some of these challenges than ever before. And the threats seem very real. How you convince people. I'm not sure. It's not there's a lot of what drives us is our personal emotional sort of desires in the moment, right? And how you get people to buy into a sort of a collective mission, where you give up some of your personal desires and that kind of stuff in order to achieve the collective absolutely, because that goes back to, I guess, like the economy and the stock market, and I personally admit that I'm more likely to invest in kind of just when I invested some money, I was offered like a growth portfolio or like an eco friendly portfolio, and I just went for the growth portfolio because I didn't kind of have the faith that that was going to grow as much, right? So I don't know what that says about me, but and whether I would fit in with kind of the general population, but I guess that's another aspect of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So, I think that some of the work that the United Nations has done specifically around the environment, right, and how to address that, and the Paris Accord, are great strides forward. In some cases we have two steps back, like we've seen with the Trump administration, but we can hope that they whatever. The right the right motives will prevail in the end.
Awesome. So, great. So the Current War is another movie. Benedict Cumberbatch playing Thomas Edison in that movie, and it's about it's a historical film about how Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse competed to create and market this electrical system 130 years ago to the American public. Really excited to see that one again, because it's not a story I know too much about, but sometimes I do kind of look at a plug sock and think, how did this all, come about, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
But we now, I think what's interesting about this one is that we're now entering this new phase of electricity, aren't we? The grid is being digitized and democratized. We have the new sources of energy coming in, like you said. Internet of Things is probably going to play a big role, and I've heard people calling it electricity 2.0. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the film, it's a historical film, but it's very relevant to the present in my mind. We, like you said, there's well, if we actually look back, at what happened back between Edison and Westinghouse, right? It was a fight between DC current and AC current, alternating current and direct current, both believed that their system was the best. Both had invested heavily in one approach, we're sort of betting that society would sort of accept their system. Both of them went to great lengths actually to prove or disprove the dangers of the other system. So the one was showing, for example, how I may get this wrong, but how direct current would kill animals if you you touched it, that kind of stuff, and the major threats that it represented, while the other was saying how it wouldn't be as efficient and that kind of stuff. So they went to great lengths to prove each other wrong, essentially. In some ways, we kind of have that with electricity 2.0 in a slightly different way, right? Mm-hmm. We have one group saying we have to be all renewable, right? This is the way to do it. There are some challenges with that, right? Like the idea of everything in a battery, it has its own sort of environmental issues, right? But generally, the idea of renewable energy, on a grid, right, makes a lot of sense. On the other side, they're saying, well, no. You know what I mean? Let's stick with some of the more traditional approaches. That's the right way to produce energy. This whole idea of this grid approach, doesn't make sense. But in many ways, they're sort of control issues, right? These groups sort of fighting for who's going to sort of control the future. So I think there's lessons to be learned from watching this film, and sort of understanding what's gone on there and how that can apply to
and then it also today. Probably tells us that in the future we're going to kind of recognize these great people who are creating this technology as well, right? And I think with AC and DC, and again my understanding might be off, but I think is it the AC that's powering basically the whole grid, and the DC that's then powering like our smartphones and our computers and our cars and things like that? Maybe the other way around, I can't remember.
No, you're right. Alternating current is definitely what drives you're the plugs in the wall.
Exciting stuff. I wanted to also talk about Eye on Juliet. That's another film. Sounds like quite an interesting concept where this guy is piloting this spider drone in the Middle East. Virtually, I think he's based in the States, and he's watching this pipeline in the Middle East. He's protecting an American-owned desert pipeline, and he becomes fascinated with a young Middle Eastern woman. And I just got me thinking, like, what does this tell us about the possibility of human relationships in the future with all this global technology that we have, this global communication?
I think that there's this interesting book. Let me see if I can remember. I believe it's called Alone Together.
Right.
And it's based on research that looks at how digital technology has already changed our concept of a relationship and what it looks like, right? Even right down to the definition of a friend. A friend used to be a noun, someone you know, right? Yeah. And now it's turned into a verb. You friend someone.
Okay.
And the digital world has sort of, created these sort of definitions. But what's fascinating about digital technology is that it has, on the one hand, increased our reach in terms of the relationships that we can have, right? Like if you think about Facebook, for example, you can have your family anywhere in the world, and you can be up and current on what's going on in their lives. My mother has taken forever to get on Facebook.
Right.
She actually just caved this summer and she got my daughters to teach her how to use an iPad and to go on creating a Facebook account, because she's realizing that she's out of touch. Everyone knew what was going on in the family, the broader family, but she was disconnected because everything was sort of happening there. No matter where people were in the world. And so these digital technologies are allowing us to sort of reach further beyond, very much like Ion Juliet, right? Here's this person, this stranger in the United States, who's essentially building a relationship with this young woman in the Middle East and thinking and becoming attached to her and thinking through how to help her and protect her at the same time. Through digital technology. So I think it's an interesting look at, or a moment where we can look at how digital technology just more broadly is changing the idea of relationship, right? And the reach of relationship, but then also, while we can reach more broadly, sometimes our relationships become more shallow at the same time.
Yeah, so it's really just kind of reinventing almost our idea of being human, right? And when you were telling about your mother, that kind of, it reminded me of a South Park episode where everyone smashes up, Cartman's friends smash up his digital technology and he becomes really lonely and he just looks around and everyone's just on their phones. But it's kind of reshaping what it means to be human almost.
Very much so, what it means to have relationship and community. What does it mean to have community with others?
Absolutely. Great. Well, it's been a fascinating chat. If you think this was cool and you want to hear more about our digital future, you can click the link in the description. There's also a live stream on September the 14th you can put in your bookmarks folder. That's part of the partnership with TIFF. And that's the Our Digital Future Summit in Toronto, where you'll hear from international thought leaders, local industry executives, and technology experts discussing these emerging technologies that we've talked about today and the future. And there's also a link to that live stream in the description below. Thanks very much, David.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam.
Cheers.
Yeah.